That night, I watched the only car that still held my late husband's cologne leave our garage in the hands of my future in-law, whom I'd met exactly 3 times. By morning, it had vanished from the DMV system like it never existed. My son's confession came in fragments. Mom, I let him test drive it then. They sold it. 30 years of restoration work. Every weekend spent bringing Ray's dream back to life. Gone in one signature I never made. If they wanted to erase me from this family's narrative, I'd turn the truth into a sledgehammer and demolish every wall they'd built. My name is Marlene Quinn, and every Friday night for the past 8 years, you'd find me in the same place, my garage in Aurora, Colorado, hands covered in metal polish, working on the chrome bumpers of a 1969 Ford Mustang Fastback, Ray's Mustang. My late husband's dream car that he'd bought as a rusted shell 3 months before the cancer diagnosis, promising we'd restore it together when he got better. He never got better, but I kept that promise anyway. The garage had become my sanctuary, while other widows joined book clubs or took up yoga. I learned about carburetors and compression ratios, the guys at Clear Sky Collision, where I kept their books and managed accounts, taught me the difference between factory paint codes and how to spot Bondo under a cheap respray. Every receipt for parts was filed chronologically in a banker's box, $23,000 worth over the years, not counting my labor. Photos documented each stage: bare metal frame, primer, base coat, clear coat. The Mustang was 85% complete, missing only some interior trim pieces that were on back order from a specialty shop in Michigan. My son Evan used to help, back when he was 19 and still raw from losing his father. We'd spend Saturdays together, him holding the work light while I explained what Ray had taught me about keeping the original numbers-matching engine. But somewhere around 23, Evan discovered podcasting, sound engineering, and the kind of crowd that talked about disrupting industries over craft beer. The garage visits stopped. The calls became texts. The texts became emoji reactions to my photos of restoration progress. Then came Lila Harrington. I first heard her name 6 months ago, when Evan mentioned he was seeing someone special. 3 months later, they were engaged. The timeline raised my eyebrows, but I kept my mouth shut. Evan was 27, old enough to make his own mistakes. The dinner to meet her family was set for a Thursday evening at some place called the Sterling Room in the Denver Tech Center, the kind of restaurant where they explain what microgreens are and water costs $12 a bottle. Barrett Harrington commanded the table like he owned it, which, given the casual mention of his portfolio properties, he probably did. 62 years old with silver hair that looked professionally managed, not naturally aged. His handshake was practiced, firm enough to establish dominance, but not quite crossing into aggression. His wife, Patricia, had that glazed pleasantness of someone who'd learned to tune out her husband's voice decades ago. Lila sat between them and Evan, managing the conversation like a flight controller, steering away from anything that might cause turbulence. "So, Marlene," Barrett said, cutting his $40 steak with surgical precision. "Evan tells me you have a classic Mustang. What year?" "69 Fastback," I replied, noticing how his eyes sharpened with interest. "Original 428 Cobra jet." "No, the 341 Windsor. But its numbers matching. Documented history back to the original dealer invoice." He leaned back, appraising me like I was a property with potential. "Those are climbing in value, especially the fastbacks. You work with a broker. I know people who specialize in moving vintage inventory. Could get you top dollar, probably 60, $70,000 for a clean one. It's not for sale. The words came out harder than I intended. Evan shifted uncomfortably. Lila's smile tightened at the corners. Everything's for sale at the right price, Barrett said with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no in any way that mattered. Sentimental value is expensive storage. That car's just depreciating in your garage when it could be appreciating in your portfolio. Dad's restoration project, Evan said quietly, the first time he'd mentioned Ray all evening. Mum's been working on it? Ah. Barrett's expression shifted to something that was supposed to look like sympathy, but felt more like calculation. Well, when you're ready to let go, I'm happy to connect you with the right people. No pressure. The conversation moved on to wedding planning, Lila discussing venues with the kind of detail that suggested spreadsheets and color-coded tabs. She mentioned a property cleanse they were doing, getting rid of redundant assets before the marriage. The phrase made my skin crawl. Patricia nodded along, occasionally murmuring about how simplified living had changed her life. 3 weeks later, Evan texted on a Friday evening. Can I borrow the Mustang tomorrow podcast industry mixer? Want to make a good impression? I hesitated. The car was running perfectly after the carburetor rebuild, but Evan hadn't driven it in 2 years. Still, maybe this was an opening, a way back to the connection we'd lost. Keys are on the hook, I texted back. Be careful. Saturday night, another text. Barrett wants to take it around the block. Guy really knows his cars. My stomach clenched. I started typing a response, then deleted it. Started again. Deleted. Finally sent, just around the block. Sunday morning at 7:30. I walked into an empty garage. The empty garage echoed like a tomb. I called Evan 17 times before he picked up at 8:45. His voice was thick, defensive before I even spoke. Mum, before you freak out. Where is my car? It's complicated. Barrett said he needed to get it inspected for insurance purposes. Something about liability if it was being driven by multiple parties. He has a guy who does mobile inspections, comes right to you with all the paperwork. Evan, where is my car right now? A pause. Background noise. Lila's voice, urgent and low. I don't. Barrett handled it. He said it would be back by Monday. Mum, I'm sorry. I thought. You thought what, that you could hand over my property to someone I barely know? He's going to be family. The word hit like a slap. I hung up and drove straight to the DMV office on Colfax, my hands shaking as I filled out a records request form. The clerk, a woman named Denise with kind eyes and infinite patience, pulled up the vehicle identification number. She said, frowning at her screen. There's a pending transfer flag here, dated yesterday, filed through Mile High Title Services. Transfer to whom? It's not completed yet, but it shows a sale pending to Front Range Vintage Motors in Boulder. Purchase price listed as... She squinted. $32,000. The floor tilted. I gripped the counter. That's impossible. I never signed anything. I never agreed to any sale. Denise printed the screen, highlighting a reference number. You'll want to call Mile High directly. They're the ones processing the paperwork. If there's been fraud, you need to file a police report immediately. My next call was to my insurance company. After 20 minutes of holds and transfers, an agent named Marcus pulled up my policy. I show here that a temporary rider was added Friday afternoon for a Barrett Harrington. authorized by an Evan Quinn, who's listed as a secondary on the policy. I never authorized Evan to make changes to my policy. There's a power of attorney document attached. Limited scope. Specifically for vehicle-related transactions. Signed by you. Notarized Thursday. Send me that document. Now. The email arrived while I was still in the DMV parking lot. The signature looked like mine, close enough to pass a casual inspection. But I knew my own hand. The M was wrong. Too rounded. The ending flourish I'd developed signing thousands of checks at work was missing. They'd copied it from somewhere. Probably the restoration photos Evan had posted on Instagram, showing me holding paperwork with the car. I drove straight to Evan's apartment in Capitol Hill. He answered the door looking haggard. Lila hovering behind him in yoga clothes that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Mom, I can explain. Start with the truth. He crumbled onto his couch. Barrett said he had a collector interested, someone who'd pay cash. Quick close. He said the car was just sitting there, that you'd never finish the restoration, that it would be better to get money you could actually use. He said he'd buy you something practical, like a new Camry. And you believed him. He said he needed signatures for the inspection, for insurance verification. I signed some papers. I thought they were just... I didn't know he was actually going to sell it. You signed papers you didn't read. Lila stepped forward. Mrs. Quinn? This is obviously a misunderstanding. Barrett sometimes moves quickly on opportunities. I'm sure he meant to discuss it with you first. He forged my signature on a power of attorney. The words hung in the air. Lila's face went pale. Evan looked like he might vomit. He said you'd agreed, Evan whispered. He said you talked about it at dinner, that you were just being stubborn about letting go, that you needed a push. I pulled out my phone and showed him the DMV screen capture. $32,000. Where's that money? Evan. I haven't seen any money. Check your bank account. He fumbled with his phone. His face went white. There's a deposit. $5,000. From Ridgeline Bank, marked as consulting fee. $5,000. Your cut for selling out your mother. Mom. I didn't know. You didn't want to know. I left them there and drove home to call the only lawyer I knew. Regina Vale, who'd handled Ray's estate. She listened to the whole story, occasionally making sharp noises of disgust. Document fraud, identity theft, criminal conversion of property. She listed. We can file criminal charges or pursue civil action. Criminals free but slower. Civil's faster but expensive up front. How expensive? 5,000 retainer to start. I laughed bitterly. Exactly what Evan got paid. Then let's make sure we get it back. Plus the car, plus damages, plus enough pain to make sure Barrett Harrington never pulls this shit again. Monday morning. I drove to Front Range Vintage Motors in Boulder, a gleaming showroom full of restored classics with price tags that could buy houses in my neighborhood. The receptionist, barely old enough to drink, looked at me like I'd wandered in from a construction site. I'm looking for a 1969 Mustang Fastback that was sold here over the weekend. She typed lazily. We don't discuss client transactions. It's my car. It was sold without my permission. Her expression shifted to mild interest, then caution. You'll need to speak with our manager, Mr. Kelway. He's in a meeting. I waited 2 hours. When Kelway finally appeared, a soft man in an expensive suit who looked like he sold promises more than cars, he was already defensive. Mrs. Quinn, we're a legitimate business. We don't deal in stolen vehicles. I didn't say stolen. I said sold without my permission. There's a difference, legally speaking. One implies you knew, the other means you're just negligent. His face reddened. The paperwork was in order. Power of attorney, title transfer, all properly notarized. Forged documents are still forgeries, even if they're notarized. I want to see the paperwork. That's confidential. Not if you're holding stolen property. We stared at each other. Finally, he pulled out a folder. There it was, the forged POA, a title transfer with my signature, and something else, a bill of sale to a private collector in Wyoming for $58,000. They'd flipped my car for nearly double what they'd paid, probably within hours. I want the buyer's information. Absolutely not. Then I'll want your security footage from this weekend. He actually laughed. Good luck with that without a warrant. But I'd learned something from working at Clear Sky. I took photos of everything I could see on his desk before he closed the folder, including a partial email address visible on an invoice Ridgeline Bank. Biz. That afternoon, Regina and I pieced together the puzzle. Mile High Title Services was owned by a holding company that shared an address with 3 other Barrett properties. The notary who'd supposedly verified my signature was licensed, but her social media showed she was in Cabo San Lucas all last week. The Ridgeline bank account that paid Evan was opened just 2 months ago. This isn't his first time, Regina said, studying the patterns. This is too smooth, too organized. He's done this before. We started digging. Colorado's public records are a gold mine if you know where to look. Barrett Harrington had a trail of LLCs, property transfers, and interestingly, 3 lawsuits in the past decade, all settled out of court, all sealed. But court records show case types, and all 3 were listed as conversion of property fraud. He targets people through their adult children, Regina concluded. Finds valuable assets, convinces the kids it's for everyone's benefit, moves fast before anyone can think twice. Classic predatory behavior. Tuesday brought another revelation. Tess Monroe, an automotive journalist I'd met at a Clear Sky event, called back with interesting news. Your Mustang caused quite a stir at the underground auction circuit, she said. Word is, Barrett guaranteed a clean title and fast transfer to avoid the usual authentication process. He told buyers you were an elderly woman with dementia who didn't remember agreeing to sell. My hands clenched. Dementia. That's the story going around. Makes it easier for buyers to ignore any red flags. Who's going to question helping a sick old lady liquidate assets for medical care? I'm 58 years old, and I manage accounts for a collision shop. I know. That's why I'm calling. This stinks. And I want to help expose it. But I need more than he said she said. Regina had already filed for an emergency injunction to prevent the car from being transferred again or leaving Colorado. The judge granted a temporary restraining order, but serving it would be the challenge. The Wyoming buyer was a ghost. Just an LLC with a P.O. box. Wednesday. I got desperate enough to go through Evan's things. While he was at work, he'd given me a key years ago for emergencies. His laptop was open on the kitchen table. The email was right there in his sent folder, a chain between him and Barrett, planning the whole thing. Barrett. Your mother's stubborn, old school, doesn't understand market timing. Evan, she'll never sell it. It's like a shrine. Barrett, shrines don't pay bills. You said she's having hours cut at work. Evan, yeah, but she won't take help. Barrett, This is help. Quick sale, clean profit. Everyone wins. She gets cash she needs. You get a finder's fee. Lila's happy. Her husband isn't struggling financially supporting his mother. Evan, she'll be furious. Barrett, for a week. Then she'll see the sense. Trust me. I've handled difficult transitions before. The last email was the killer. Evan, just make sure she gets fair market value. Barrett, of course. 30,000 is more than fair for a car that's been sitting for 8 years. Evan knew. He knew Barrett was lowballing, knew the real value, and went along with it for $5,000 and his future father-in-law's approval. Regina laid out our battle plan like a general preparing for war. We met in her office Thursday morning, documents spread across her conference table like tactical maps. Three-pronged attack, she said, placing her coffee cup down with precision. Legal, financial, and social. Barrett Harrington thinks he's untouchable because he's always controlled the narrative. We're going to change that. The legal prong was already in motion. Regina had filed a formal complaint with the Arapahoe County Court, requesting an emergency replevin order, a legal demand for the immediate return of wrongfully taken property. The filing included everything the forged power of attorney with side-by-side signature comparisons. Timestamps from the DMV showing the transfer was initiated while I was at work. Photos documenting the restoration with date stamps going back 8 years. And Evan's emails admitting he never had authority to authorize anything. The judge will see this Monday, Regina said. But that's not enough. These guys always have backup plans. The financial prong required more finesse. I spent Thursday afternoon at Ridgeline Bank's compliance department. The manager, a sharp woman named Carol Okonkwo, listened to my story with increasing concern. A power of attorney for vehicle transactions used to open financial positions. She pulled up screens I couldn't see, fingers flying across her keyboard. Mr. Harrington has several accounts with us. This one, she pointed to her monitor, was opened 8 weeks ago, specifically for what he called vintage automotive investments. Is that normal? Creating a dedicated account. Yes. Using it to immediately process a transaction based on a POA that the principal denies signing. That triggers our anti-money laundering protocols. She couldn't share details, but her expression told me she'd found something. We'll need to freeze any pending transactions while we investigate. Your attorney will receive documentation for your case. The social prong that was where we could hit Barrett where it really hurt. Tess Monroe met me at a coffee shop in Lodo. She'd done her homework. Barrett Harrington sits on the board of High Prairie Promise, a charity that funds vocational programs for at-risk youth, she said, sliding a folder across the table. Their annual gala is next Saturday. $500 a plate. All of Denver's social elite. He's being honored for his commitment to ethical business practices. I almost choked on my coffee. The irony's not lost on me either, Tess said. Here's the thing, I can't publish accusations without proof. But if you were to, say, appear at a public event with documentation of fraud, and if that documentation happened to be newsworthy, you'd cover it. With photographers. Regina loved it. Public shame is often more effective than legal penalties for men like Barrett. But we need to be strategic. If we're going to strike, we need everything lined up perfectly. Friday afternoon. Lila called me. Her voice was strained, carefully controlled. Mrs. Quinn, could we meet without Evan? We met at a neutral location, a Panera in Cherry Creek. She looked exhausted, designer bags under her eyes. I need you to understand something, she started. I didn't know what my father was planning, but I'm also not surprised. Meaning, she stirred her coffee obsessively. He's done this before. Not with cars, but with art, jewelry, anything valuable that people are emotionally attached to. He calls it liberating frozen assets. He finds people who won't sell, creates situations where they have to, then flips for profit. And you're okay with this? No. The word came out sharp. But I'm also getting married in 3 months. My entire family. All our friends. Everyone's already invested in this wedding. If this becomes public. Your father made it public when he stole from me. I know. She met my eyes for the first time. That's why I'm here. I have access to his files. The real ones. Not the sanitized versions he shows lawyers. She slid a flash drive across the table. There are 12 other cases in there. Names, amounts, documentation. He keeps records of everything because he's proud of it. Calls it his acquisition archive. Why are you giving this to me? Because I love Evan, and he loves you, even if he's too stupid to show it properly. And because maybe if my father finally faces consequences, he'll stop. My mother deserves better than spending her life cleaning up his messes. The flash drive was a goldmine. Screenshots of text messages, emails, bank transfers, even voice memo transcripts where Barrett bragged about his deals. One name appeared repeatedly as his fence for automotive transactions, Derek Slade, at Front Range Vintage Motors. Regina's eyes gleamed as she reviewed everything. This changes things. This isn't just fraud, it's a pattern of racketeering. RICO territory if we play it right. I don't want to destroy him, I said, though part of me did. I just want my car back. No, Regina said firmly. You want your car back, your reputation restored, compensation for damages, and guarantees this never happens again. That requires more than just asking nicely. She was right. Barrett had counted on me being too poor, too tired, or too intimidated to fight back. He'd picked the wrong widow. The High Mesa Grand Hotel blazed with light, its ballroom entrance flanked by professional photographers capturing Denver's social elite in their evening wear. I walked through the lobby at 8:15 precisely. Deputy Martinez beside me in his dress uniform. Regina on my other side carrying her briefcase like a weapon. The ballroom was a sea of black ties and cocktail dresses, round tables with centerpieces that probably cost more than my weekly groceries. Barrett stood near the stage, surrounded by admirers, gesturing broadly as he held court. Patricia stood slightly behind him, that same glazed smile fixed in place. I spotted Evan and Lila at a corner table. She saw me first, her face going pale as she grabbed Evan's arm. We moved through the crowd with purpose. Conversations died in our wake as people noticed the uniformed officer. By the time we reached Barrett, a circle of silence had formed around us. Barrett Harrington. Deputy Martinez's voice cut through the jazz quartet. Barrett turned, his politician's smile faltering when he saw me. Marlene? What is this? Mr. Harrington, I'm serving you with a court order for the immediate return of property fraudulently obtained, a restraining order, a notice of pending criminal charges for fraud, forgery, and theft by deception. The deputy handed him the papers as Regina opened her briefcase, pulling out a laptop. The screen was already connected to her phone's hotspot. She turned it toward the growing crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the interruption, but you should know who you're honoring tonight. The screen showed the forged power of attorney, my real signature beside it for comparison. Then the email chain between Barrett and Evan. Then the DMV records showing the fraudulent transfer. The crowd pressed closer, murmurs rising. Barrett's face went from red to purple. This is a family matter. It's a criminal matter, Regina corrected. You stole a vintage automobile worth $60,000 from a widow by forging legal documents. You've done it before. Would anyone like to see the other 12 cases? Someone gasped. The photographers Tess had arranged were shooting rapidly, their flashes creating a strobe effect. I saw board members from High Prairie Promise exchanging horrified looks. This is defamation, Barrett sputtered. I'll sue you into bankruptcy. Truth is an absolute defense against defamation, Regina said calmly. Every document here is verified. Ridgeline Bank has frozen your accounts pending investigation. The FBI's white-collar crime division has been notified about the pattern of interstate fraud. Patricia finally moved, stepping away from her husband like he was contaminated. Barrett, what did you do? I made a business deal. The car was sitting there rotting. It was being restored, I said, my voice carrying across the silent ballroom. Every weekend for 8 years. I worked on that car. It was my husband's dream. And after he died, it became mine. You knew that. Your son-in-law told you. And you stole it anyway because you could. Because you thought I was just some working-class nobody who couldn't fight back. The crowd was fully engaged now, phones out, recording everything. Someone from the charity board approached, an older man with silver hair and genuine distress on his face. Barrett, is this true? It's a misunderstanding. Regina clicked to the next slide the bill of sale to Wyoming, showing the $26,000 profit Barrett would have made. Misunderstandings don't usually involve forged notarizations and shell companies. This is enough, the board member said. Barrett, you need to leave. The board will meet tomorrow to discuss your immediate removal. You can't do this. Barrett's composure finally cracked completely. I've donated hundreds of thousands. Stolen money doesn't count as charity. Someone in the crowd called out. Evan finally appeared, pushing through the crowd. Mum, please. Your son was paid $5,000 for his participation, Regina announced, showing the bank transfer. Listed as a consulting fee from the same account used to purchase the stolen vehicle. The silence that followed was deafening. Lila stood behind Evan, her face a mask of fury, but it wasn't directed at me. You told me it was a misunderstanding, she said to Evan, her voice low but carrying. You said your mother agreed. You lied to me. Lila, no. She pulled her engagement ring off, placing it in his hand. My father is a criminal, but at least he owns it. You're just a coward. Barrett tried once more to salvage something. The car has already been sold. The sale is frozen. Regina interrupted. Ridgeline Bank has suspended the transaction. The storage facility has been notified. Sheriff's Department will retrieve the vehicle tomorrow morning at 9. I looked Barrett in the eye. You thought I was nothing, just some widow you could roll over. But I kept every receipt, every document, every photo. Because that car isn't just property. It's proof that love means finishing what someone started, even after they're gone. Deputy Martinez stepped forward. Mr. Harrington, you're required to provide the exact location of the vehicle and any keys in your possession within 24 hours, or face immediate arrest for contempt of court. The crowd parted as we left, a sea of shocked faces and whispered conversations. Behind us, Barrett's world was collapsing in real-time, board members walking away, donors demanding answers, his wife's voice rising in fury. In the parking lot, Regina smiled. That went better than expected. It's not over, I said. No, she agreed. But he'll never recover from this. By morning, everyone in Denver will know Barrett Harrington is a thief. Tuesday morning arrived with Tess Monroe's article splashed across the Denver Post's front page, charity board member accused of vintage car theft. My phone hadn't stopped ringing since 6 a.m. Regina fielded the legal calls while I prepared for what came next, actually recovering my car. At 8:45, we assembled at the Plateau View storage facility in Commerce City myself, Regina, Deputy Martinez, and 2 additional officers. Barrett's lawyer, a nervous man named Hutchins, arrived with a single key and a sour expression. My client maintains this is a civil dispute, Hutchins said. Your client is lucky he's not in handcuffs. Deputy Martinez replied. The key. Hutchins handed it over. Unit 447, Mr. Harrington won't be present. Coward, I muttered. The storage facility manager led us through rows of identical units. When we reached 447, my heart was pounding. The door rolled up, and there it was. But something was wrong. That's not my car, I said immediately. Everyone turned to stare at the Mustang. Mrs. Quinn. Are you sure? Deputy Martinez asked. I walked around it slowly. It was a 1969 fastback. Same color. But the details were wrong. The VIN plate's been tampered with. Look. I pointed to the driver's door jamb. Fresh rivets. Someone swapped the plates. Regina was already on her phone. We need a forensic team here now. The facility manager looked panicked. We don't inspect vehicles. We just store them. Check your cameras, I demanded. When was this car brought in? While he pulled footage, I examined the car more carefully. The engine was wrong, a 390, not the 351 Windsor. The interior was burgundy, not black. This was a different Mustang entirely, dressed up to look like mine. Son of a bitch is still trying to play games, Regina said. The security footage was revealing. Sunday night at 11:43 p. A flatbed had arrived with this Mustang. Monday morning at 2 a.m. Another flatbed had left with a covered vehicle. He swapped them, Deputy Martinez concluded. Moved the real one before we could serve the order. Tess arrived as we were processing this, her photographer in tow. Got a tip you might need backup. They moved my car again, I told her. This is a decoy. She immediately started making calls. Within an hour, she had information. My source at Colorado Butte says a vintage Mustang matching your description was logged passing through a way station on I-70 eastbound early Monday morning. Transport company listed as High Country Classic Logistics. Never heard of them, the facility manager said. Regina was already searching. Incorporated last Friday. Guess who's the registered agent Derek Slade from Front Range Vintage Motors? The pieces were falling into place. Barrett hadn't given up. He'd just gotten more creative. But he'd made a mistake. The transport company needed DOT permits, and those were trackable. They're heading to an auction house, Tess announced, reading from her phone. 4 states classic auction in Kansas. Big event this weekend. Lots of out-of-state buyers who won't ask questions. That's federal, Regina said. Interstate transportation of stolen property. FBI territory now. We spent the afternoon at the federal building, filing reports with the FBI's Interstate Theft Division. Special Agent Caroline Moss took the case seriously. especially when she saw the pattern of Barrett's previous frauds. "We've been watching similar schemes," she said. "Classic cars are becoming like art, easy to move, hard to trace, perfect for laundering money." By 5 p. We had a federal warrant and a plan. The auction was Saturday. If we moved fast, we could intercept the car before it hit the auction block. But we needed to be smart. Barrett still had connections, and Kansas was outside local jurisdiction. Wednesday morning brought unexpected allies. 3 of Barrett's previous victims had seen Tess's article and reached out. A retired teacher whose husband's Corvette had been sold. A young chef whose inherited Porsche had vanished. An elderly man whose Plymouth Barracuda had been donated to a charity that didn't exist. "Class action potential," Regina said. "But first, we get your car." Agent Moss coordinated with Kansas State Police. The transport company's logs showed they were scheduled to arrive at the auction house Friday afternoon. We would be there Thursday night. "I'm coming with you," I said. "This is a law enforcement operation." Agent Moss started. "It's my car. I can identify every non-original part, every modification, every scratch. You need me." She conceded the point. Thursday at noon, we headed east in a convoy Agent Moss's federal vehicle, Regina's BMW, and my 10-year-old Honda. 6 hours to drive. My whole life hanging in the balance. Evan had called 17 times. I hadn't answered once. As we crossed into Kansas, Regina's phone rang. She put it on speaker. "Ms. Vale. This is Patricia Harrington. I need to speak with Mrs. Quinn." "I'm here," I said. "I'm filing for divorce. Barrett's hidden more than you know. I want to help, but I need immunity for anything I reveal." Regina and Agent Moss exchanged looks. "We can discuss that," Moss said. "What do you know about the car's location?" "It's not going to the auction house. That's another decoy. The real destination is a private buyer in Texas. The auction is just to establish a paper trail." My hands clenched. Another misdirection. "Where in Texas?" Moss demanded. "I don't know exactly, but I know when Saturday at 10 a.m. The real handoff is at a truck stop outside Amarillo." We changed course immediately, heading south toward Amarillo. Agent Moss coordinated with Texas state troopers while Regina worked her phone, tracking down the auction house's records. The 4 states classic auction was real. But Patricia was right. It was all misdirection. Friday morning at 9 a.m., we arrived at the auction house in Liberal, Kansas, exhausted but determined. The place was buzzing with pre-auction activity, trailers and transporters everywhere. And there, bold as brass, stood Barrett Harrington with Derek Slade, examining a clipboard near the registration tent. "Stay in the vehicle," Agent Moss ordered. "Let me handle this." But I was already out of the car. Barrett saw me coming and his face went white. "You just don't know when to quit," he said. "Where's my car?" "Barrett." "I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm here for legitimate business." Derek Slade tried to slip away, but Deputy Martinez, who'd driven through the night to join us, blocked his path. "Mr. Slade, we have a federal warrant to search your transport vehicles." The search revealed 3 classic cars, none of them mine. But in the cab of one truck, they found paperwork that changed everything. A bill of lading for a 1969 Mustang Fastback, scheduled for special delivery to Amarillo. Departure time 3 a.m. Saturday morning? "It's already gone," I said, my heart sinking. "No," Agent Moss said, checking her watch. If they left at 3, they're maybe 6 hours ahead. We can intercept them. The auction house owner, a legitimate businessman named Curtis Wade, who was horrified to learn about the fraud, offered something valuable. Every transport has GPS tracking for insurance. If you have the unit number, Derek's paperwork had it. Within minutes, we had a real-time location. The truck was at a rest stop on Route 287, 40 miles from Amarillo. We need to move now, Moss said. The Texas Highway Patrol set up the intercept while we raced south. My phone rang Evan again. This time I answered. Mom, Lila told me everything. About her dad's past frauds. About the plan to move the car twice. I didn't know. You knew enough. I'm in Amarillo. I nearly dropped the phone. What? I've been following the transport. I wanted to fix this. The driver doesn't know he's carrying stolen property. He thinks it's a legitimate delivery to a collector named Harrison Walsh. That's probably another of Barrett's aliases, Regina said. Mom, the handoff is at 10, but not at a truck stop. It's at a private airfield. They're flying it out of the country. Agent Moss grabbed my phone. Evan, this is Special Agent Moss. Where exactly? He gave her coordinates for a small airfield outside Amarillo. We were still 90 minutes away. There's more, Evan said. Barrett's already there with the buyer. They're not waiting until 10. We pushed harder, the speedometer climbing. Local police were scrambled to the airfield, but it was rural, isolated. By the time they arrived, the plane could be gone. At 9:28, we screamed into the airfield's access road. A Cessna Caravan was on the tarmac, cargo door open. The transport truck was backed up to it, ramps down. And there my Mustang, halfway up the loading ramp. Federal agents stopped loading that aircraft. Everything happened at once. Barrett, standing by the plane, turned to run. The buyer, a thin man in an expensive suit, raised his hands immediately. The transport driver looked confused. And Evan, my son, was standing by my car, his hand on its hood like he was protecting it. Nobody move, Agent Moss commanded. Barrett made one last attempt at brass. This is a legal transaction, based on forged documents and interstate fraud. Moss cut him off. Barrett Harrington, you're under arrest for interstate transportation of stolen property, wire fraud, and conspiracy. The cuffs went on. Barrett's expression was pure rage as he was read his rights. The buyer immediately distanced himself, claiming he'd been told it was a legal sale, that he had no knowledge of any theft. I walked to my car, running my hand along its familiar lines. Everything looked intact, even the small dent in the rear quarter panel that Ray had said gave it character. Evan stood beside me, silent. I'm sorry, he finally said. I'm so fucking sorry, Mom. Sorry doesn't undo it. I know, but I testified. I turned to look at him. He pulled out his phone, showing me an email. I sent this to Agent Moss yesterday. Every conversation with Barrett, every document he had me sign, the real bank records showing he was planning to keep 40,000 of the profit. I recorded our last conversation where he admitted to the forgery. Regina examined the email. This is why we knew about the airfield. Evan's been cooperating with federal authorities since Wednesday. It doesn't make up for what I did, Evan said. But maybe it helps make it right. The transport driver, innocent of any wrongdoing, helped us unload the Mustang. As it rolled onto the tarmac, the morning sun hit the paint just right. And for a moment, I could see Ray standing there, grinning at his dream finally coming true. We'll need to transport it back to Colorado as evidence, Agent Moss said. But after that, it's yours, free and clear. Barrett was led past us toward the federal vehicle. He stopped, looking at me with undisguised hatred. You destroyed everything, he said. No, I replied. You did that yourself. I just refused to be another victim. The federal courthouse in Denver was packed the following Monday. Barrett Harrington, in an orange jumpsuit that replaced his usual designer suits, stood before Judge William Brennan as the charges were read. Interstate transportation of stolen property, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery of government documents. The list went on for 3 minutes. His lawyer tried to argue for bail, citing Barrett's community ties and charitable work. Agent Moss presented evidence of 12 other similar frauds, plus Patricia Harrington's testimony that her husband had already transferred $2 million to offshore accounts. Bail denied, Judge Brennan ruled. Mr. Harrington is a flight risk and a danger to the community's financial well-being. In the gallery, Barrett's former victims sat together: the retired teacher, the chef, the elderly man with the barracuda. Each would have their day in court. The class action Regina had suggested was moving forward, with Patricia Harrington as a cooperating witness in exchange for immunity. Outside the courthouse, Tess Monroe was waiting with her photographer. The story had gone national. Wire services picked it up as an example of COVID-era fraud schemes targeting vulnerable populations. How does it feel? She asked. Like justice, I said. Finally. The settlement conference happened 2 weeks later. Barrett, facing 20 years in federal prison, agreed to full restitution, not just returning the Mustang, but paying $50,000 in damages, covering all legal fees, and most importantly, allocating $300,000 to compensate his other victims. Derek Slade and Front Range Vintage Motors faced separate charges. The business was shuttered, its inventory frozen pending investigation. Mile High Title Services lost their license. The notary who'd been in Cabo while her stamp was used, she pled guilty to conspiracy and got probation in exchange for testimony. The Mustang was returned to me on a Tuesday afternoon, delivered by federal transport to my garage in Aurora. I stood there for an hour, just looking at it, remembering every mile of this journey. The guys from Clear Sky Collision came by after work, bringing beer and stories. My boss, who'd had to cut my hours, offered me a raise. Turned out the publicity had brought in dozens of new customers who wanted their cars worked on by the woman who fought Barrett Harrington and won. Evan came by that evening, alone. Lila had ended their engagement, moved back to Boston to escape her father's shadow. He stood in the garage doorway, hands in his pockets. I know you can't forgive me, he said. Forgiveness isn't the issue. Trust is. I want to earn it back. I looked at him, really looked at him. The boy who'd helped sand primer was still there, buried under the mistakes and bad judgment. The interior trim pieces came in from Michigan, I said, pointing to a box on the workbench. Installation is tricky, requires patience. He understood the invitation for what it was: not forgiveness, but a chance to rebuild. He picked up the box, studying the parts. Dad would have loved to see it finished, he said. He does see it, I replied. Every time I turn the key. We worked in silence for 3 hours, installing the trim pieces that would complete the restoration. When we finished, the Mustang was perfect, exactly as Ray had envisioned it all those years ago. Barrett Harrington was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison, with 5 years supervised probation. He was also barred from any fiduciary role for life. Patricia's divorce was finalized while he was in custody. She got everything that wasn't already frozen by federal asset forfeiture. The other victims received their compensation. The retired teacher bought a new Corvette with her settlement. The chef reopened his restaurant that had closed due to the financial strain. The elderly man donated his portion to a legitimate charity, one that Barrett had only pretended to support. 3 months later, on a Saturday afternoon, I drove the Mustang to Ray's grave. It was the first time I'd brought the completed car there. I parked it where he could see it, if such things were possible, and sat on the grass beside his headstone. "We did it," I told him. "Took some fighting, but we did it." The wind rustled through the cemetery trees, and for just a moment, I could swear I smelled his cologne mixed with motor oil, the scent that had defined our garage for so many years. Evan and I were slowly rebuilding our relationship, one restoration project at a time. He'd started seeing a therapist, working through why he'd been so eager to trade his integrity for approval. Some Saturdays, we worked together in the garage, not talking about the betrayal, just focusing on the work, rebuilding a carburetor, adjusting the timing, the mechanical meditation that had once bonded us. The Mustang became locally famous. At car shows, people wanted to hear the story. I told it simply sometimes protecting what you love means fighting harder than you ever thought possible. Sometimes the people who should protect you become the threat. And sometimes a 1969 Mustang Fastback is more than just a car. It's proof that love transcends death, that promises matter, and that nobody, no matter how rich or connected, gets to steal your dreams. The title now sits in a safety deposit box, along with every document from the case. Because I learned something important when someone shows you they're willing to steal from you once. Believe them, and be ready. Thank you for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below, and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Have you ever had to fight for something that meant everything to you? I'd love to hear about it.